Hello everyone, this is chapter 7 Water Resources from your textbook. In this video, we will try to understand what is irrigation, the need for irrigation to a country, and we'll try to do one common form of irrigation, that is well irrigation. So let us begin. Now, water is one of the most precious natural resources that is available to us. Okay, and water, the main source of water in India is a rainfall. We heavily depend on monsoon. We eagerly wait for monsoon to arrive in our country. So, what are the different uses of water? We use water on a day to day basis. We use water for domestic consumption, for cooking, washing, drinking, isn't it? Irrigation purpose to provide artificial water to crops when there's no rainfall. We have to depend on irrigation. Even transport network, the waterways require water. Piscatory, the fisheries industries require water. Industrially, many different industries depend on water. Even for the production of electricity, like hydroelectrics, they require water. And recreation purpose, like a hotel, swimming pools, a resort, they all depend on water. So water is very important natural resource that is available to us, and we require it on a day-to-day basis. Now let us try to understand what is irrigation. Being an agrarian country, India is heavily dependent on water resources for irrigation. So we, being an agrarian, heavily dependent on agriculture. More than 70% of our population is heavily dependent on agriculture. So we are one country who has to depend on water for irrigation purposes. Now let's try to understand what we mean by irrigation in the next slide. Now, what is irrigation? It is important that we understand the definition of meaning of irrigation. Irrigation refers to the process of watering of cultivated plants through artificial means such as well, canal, pond, lakes, etc. So the artificial way of providing water to our crops is known as irrigation. Alright. Now irrigation will have two sources. One is a primary source of irrigation, one is a secondary. Now all the resources such as rainfall, rivers are all your primary, that is your main sources of irrigation, whereas wells, tank, canal, pond, lakes, these are all your secondary sources of irrigation. So irrigation will have two sources. One is the main source of irrigation, that is your rainfall and rivers, and second are your artificial or man-made sources of irrigation like well, tank, canal. All right, and this picture here helps us to understand how important are rivers and water bodies to a country, because we utilize these rivers and water bodies for many different purposes. All right, so that is what is meant by irrigation. Now moving to the next slide. Need for irrigation in India. This is a very important section. Many times we get question from here. What is the need? Why does India require irrigation? Or why are we heavily dependent on irrigation? Why is irrigation required for a country like India? So being an agricultural country, more than two-thirds of our population is engaged in farming and other related activities. The following are the reasons why irrigation is necessary for agriculture and overall economic development of India. So the first and the main reason is uncertainty of rainfall. Okay, so India experiences unpredictable rainfall. Delay in the arrival and early withdrawal of monsoon can not only affect crop yield but also lead to crop failure. So our rainfall, a monsoon, is quite uncertain. Sometimes it arrives early, sometimes there is delay in the arrival of a monsoon. So this can affect a lot of production in terms of crop, and can even lead to crop failure when the crop does not meet the requirement of water at that required time. Then that can lead to crop failure. So because a monsoon is very uncertain and unreliable, that is why we have to really depend on artificial way of providing water to crops, that is irrigation. The second reason why our country require irrigation is because of the uneven and erratic nature rainfall. Like we've covered, rainfall is very uneven and irregular, erratic in nature. Only 1/10 of the country receives above 200 centimeter rainfall. Rainfall varies from place to place, and this clearly proves that we have to depend on irrigation. Rainfall is distributed unevenly over the country, isn't it? Some regions receive less than 25 centimeter of annual rainfall, whereas some areas receive more than 200 centimeter of annual rainfall. So because rainfall is sporadic, irregular in nature, that is why irrigation is necessary for our country. Third, crop requirements. Irrespective of the season when they grow, Most of the crops need varying amounts of water at different stages of their growth. This is met only by irrigation, because many different crops have their own requirement of water. Some might require a great amount of water at a later stage. Some might require heavy amount of water in the earlier stage. But when there is no monsoon, arrival of monsoon, then we have to heavily dependent on irrigation, because of the nature of water requirement by different crops at different stages. Next, nature of soil. As we've already learned in the chapter soil, we learned that India has many different types of soil, starting from black soil, we have alluvial soil, we learned about laterite. Now each kind of soil have their own characteristic features. Now some soils, especially black soil, is moisture retentive, meaning they require less irrigation because they can hold a lot of moisture. Alright, whereas there are other soils like alluvial, red and laterite, which has to be provided with regular supply water, as they cannot hold moisture. So that is the fourth reason why irrigation is important for a country like India, is because of the nature of soil. Some of the soil are require regular supply water, whereas especially black soil requires less water because it can hold a lot of moisture. And the last and the most important reason why irrigation is important for a country like India is because to increase our agriculture production. As we all know, population is rising, the demand for food is increasing, isn't it? Because there's ever increasing demand for food, whereas there's less and less land available for cultivation because of the rise in population, industry is growing, so there's very less land available for growing crops. So in order to meet the demand of increasing food, what do we have to do? We have to provide good irrigation facilities, so that agriculture production is the only way to meet the growing demand for agriculture products. So these are the main reasons as to why irrigation is very important for a country like India. Now, moving to the common forms of irrigation. These are your common forms of irrigation that is practiced in India. One is a well irrigation, we have tank irrigation and canal irrigation. We will try to do well irrigation for today's lesson. Now, moving to what is a well irrigation? What is a well irrigation? Let's first try to understand. About 40% of the total irrigated land in India is covered by various types of wells. So 40% of the irrigation that is available to a country is mostly through wells. Okay, so what are the different conditions that are required by well? Water table. The water table has to be high, not more than 10 to 15 meter deep, so that because you have to dig. So that is why if the water table is really low, then it becomes very difficult, and it becomes time consuming, at the same time expensive. So the higher the water table, better for well irrigation. Softer soil, because you have to again dig the soil. So if the soil is softer and composed of soft rocks, it enables easy digging of wells. So that is why softer soils are better for well irrigation. Third, clayey bed to enable the storage of water and further digging if necessary. If the bed of the soil is clay, soft, then the storage of water is better. At the same time, if it dries up and it requires further digging, it becomes easier if the bed is clay, soft. Now, which are the states? You must remember well irrigation. UP is a very popular state which has plenty of well irrigation. So please try to remember Uttar Pradesh. The many other states you can remember at least two: Haryana, Bihar. Okay, so these are some other states where well irrigation is practiced in India. Now, moving to the types of well irrigation. What are the different types of well irrigation? There are two types of well irrigation. One is a surface well, one is a tube well. Now, what is a surface well? Surface well are of two types. One is the unlined surface well. Okay, so and other is your lined surface well. So what is the difference between lined and unlined? So let's begin with unlined surface well. What is an unlined surface well? They are also known as kacha wells. They are dug mainly to enable indigenous forms of agriculture, meaning your traditional forms of agriculture that has been practiced for years. They do not have a protective wall around them. They are generally found in the cultivable land away from homes. So why is it known as unlined? Is because they don't have a wall around them. They are also known as kacha well, and they are mostly, if you look into this picture, away from homes in cultivable land. If they see there's no boundary, okay, So nothing like a protective wall to cover the well. So that is why it is known as unlined well. The second type is a lined well. They are also called pakka wells. They are deeper and have a brick and cemented enclosure around. They are found mainly in areas of high water table near the houses. If you look here, this is a lined well. Like how you can see, they have a wall around, a protective wall made of brick and a cemented enclosure, mostly found close to home. And they can, they also use electric and diesel to pump water from these unlined wells. Okay, so that is the difference between lined and unlined well. Now, what are the advantages of well irrigation? The advantages of well irrigation is that it is easily accessible to farmers. Okay, they can easily access well, they can easily uh, construct well in areas where they find convenient. Cheaper to construct is in comparison to other forms of irrigation like a canal, tank. Wells are comparatively cheaper to build. Farmers have control over the use of water, so they don't have to worry about the excessive or unchecked use of water. They can have a lot of control. They have a lot of control over the use of water. So these are the three advantages of well irrigation. Moving to the disadvantages. Open wells irrigate easily small area in comparison to tube wells. So one drawback is that well can only irrigate, meaning provide water to crops in a smaller area. You cannot use the water from the well to irrigate areas which are far from the well. They occupy more of usable land. Most of the time, they occupy a lot of land which could have otherwise used for growing crops. Wells often dry up during drier months due to withdrawal of groundwater. So, overutilization can lead to the groundwater being low, and it can lead to drying up wells, especially during the drier months. Okay, there is no rainfall. Erratic power supply in rural areas affects well irrigation. If the power supply is very erratic, meaning irregular, then it becomes very difficult, especially to use lined well to pump water from the lined well. So these are the disadvantages of well irrigation. Now moving to the next. If you look into this picture, you will be able to understand what are the different problems. To summarize, we learned about how erratic power supply, how well irrigation can only irrigate small area. You cannot use this water to irrigate other areas which are far from where the well is being constructed. One major problem is that loss of water due to evaporation, because well do not have a covering on top. So it can lead to lot of evaporation, loss of water because of the well not being covered. Waterable in monsoon time, the water remains really high, but after pre-monsoon or post-monsoon, the water table can really go down, and then it can lead to drying up of the wells. Now, where do you find surface well? Again, Uttar Pradesh is one state I want you to learn for well irrigation. Other than that, you can learn any other state like Punjab, Maharashtra. Now, well irrigation is more popular in the southern state. This is very important question you might get. Why is well irrigation popular in the southern part of India? Is because of the favorable condition that is required for, like clay soil is available. The soils are soft in nature. At the same time, water table is really high. So that is why it is most popular in the southern states of India. So please try to remember that. Now, this is a few facts that you can read about why well irrigation is popular in southern India. Now, that is about the first well, that is a surface well. Moving to the second type of well, that is a tube well. Now, what are tube well? So, tube wells are basically, what are tube wells? They are deep bores which are drilled into the ground manually or with a drill mounted on a huge machine. So basically holes that are you know holes that are dug in the ground to extract water using a drill or a huge machine is known as your tube well. All right, now what are the different areas, which are the different areas where you find tube well? Gangetic Plains, where the soil is soft and the water table is very high, tube wells are largely dug using manual labor. So Gangetic Plains, this portion of air, Gangetic Plains are very popular for tube well because the soil is soft, even water table is high, and that could be easily dug using manual labor. Like you can see here, this is South India, not very favorable because the hard rock, okay, water table being very low. But this is your northern part of India, the Gangetic Plains, where you see soft soil and the water table is also high. That's why tube wells are very popular in the Gangetic Plains. Next states where you find tube wells. Tube wells are popular in Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh. So you can remember other states as well. Please try to remember Punjab, that is important for tube well. Now, what are the advantages of tube well? The first advantage is that they are deeper and have more water in comparison to their surface well. So that means they can irrigate larger area. Alright. Second, they are more reliable during drought season because they are deeper and they are found in area where water table is high. That is why more reliable even during dry period. The salinity, the salt content in the well is low because of zero evaporation, because tube well is closed on top in comparison to surface well which had no covering. So less evaporation, meaning less salinity in the water. They occupy less area in comparison to your open well or tank. So they don't require as larger area as your well, surface well. So tube well requires less area, so you can have other areas utilized for growing crops. Since they are completely covered from the top, they are not dangerous like a surface well. So less covered, so no no chances of evaporation, less salinity in comparison to your surface well. States where you find tube well: UP, Punjab. You can remember two states. So that is about what irrigation is, why do we require irrigation, and we've learned about one common form of irrigation, that is well irrigation, where we've learned about surface well which consists of two types, lined and unlined, and we've learned about tube well. Thank you.